Right, Ashley, good morning. Sunday
Morning.
morning.
I know. Hello.
Nice early start for us both. To people that are watching this, listeners, watchers, I am joined this morning with the lovely Ashley. Ashley is here with me. We're going to talk about the LGBT History Month, which of course is February. We're going to talk about all aspects of the LGBT community, the demographic, the history, the progress, the evolution, and all bits in between. Ashley is here representing that community, of course. I'm a big outside viewer, let's say, in terms of the industry I'm in recruitment. It's a massive factor. So hopefully I'm going to learn some things. We'll challenge some views. We'll challenge some stereotypes, and we'll see where the journey takes us. So how are we feeling?
Good. I mean, you say you're a big outsider. I think the best word to use is you're an ally. You're an ally. You're not an outsider. We are
No.
so inclusive that you can be part of our cool group, if you like, as an
Well,
ally.
do you know what? And I kind of think I am. I think I've got a big kind of affiliation. I think with certainly the gay community. My uncles are gay. Some good friends of mine are gay. I'm very much a gay straight man in my own style. I think
Yeah.
we both agree on that.
Yeah.
So look, no, I'm all for it, and I'm a big fan, and I think there's lots of positives that people can learn from it. So, I mean, look, we're going to dive straight in then to some of the questions that we wanted to talk about, some of the things that we've prepared. The first one, I think, a good opening question then, Ashley, is what is your view on the LGBT community now? And do you feel there's a complete acceptance right now? Do you feel that we are in an equal world when it comes to the LGBT community, or is there still a lot of work to do? Give me your view, your sense on that in terms of your position and who you are.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely still work to do. And I think there's work to do in every aspect of every minority, every community, whether it's LGBT plus, whether it's women's rights, whatever it is, there's still always work to do. I don't think there's ever a point where we can just say, okay, we've done it, we can stop now, we can rest. However, times have changed massively. I grew up in the 90s. And even then, it was kind of changing. I remember it being kind of not as taboo to see a gay person on the TV. We had the likes of Paul O'Grady as Lily Savage. We had Dale Winton. We had all of these people, Julian Clary. So we had almost a representative for us, so to speak, that was accepted at prime time, accepted on the TV. And it wasn't, we'd moved away from gay people on TV being a joke. So if
Yeah,
you take it back to Are You Being Served? And we had Mr. Humphreys, who was
yeah,
joke, and it was comic relief, and so it was very overly camp, never mentioned about him being gay.
yeah.
That the joke was that he was gay, and I think that that opened the doors to allow many straight people to mock gays because they saw them being mocked. So then we move forward to the 90s, to the mid to late 90s, and it's okay that they're presenting shows at prime time on Saturday night, and they're doing this stuff where being gay isn't their joke. It isn't the butt of the joke. They just so happen to be funny gay men. So I think that we've moved away from that in the 90s. So it was more acceptable. And then you take it through to the noughties and the early 2000s. And I think suddenly it kind of all went quiet on the Western front, so to speak. It wasn't necessarily a huge thing. And I remember a lot of boy bands, or a lot of bands in general, who all kind of had a gay member, but they had to like come out, and when they did come out, it was a huge front newspaper like thing.
Yeah.
So it kind of then became this who's gay, who's gay, who's gay, like, and once again it was almost trying to out people. And I remember the guy from Westlife, Mark, I want to say, when
Uh,
he came out, was it
yeah,
Mark?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Huge Westlife fan now, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I
Where's
remember,
yeah.
Yeah. I remember Mark coming out, and I remember seeing girls crying and
Mm.
bawling and being really upset that he was gay. And it was like they'd lost this one half of their fan base for being gay. And that again is so like kind of course, then more people are going to stay in the closet who are in the public eye because they don't want to lose that fan base. They don't want to lose the sales, they don't want to lose the popularity. So that was kind of like the early noughties, and now we step forward into, you know, the 2010s onwards, and I definitely think it's more accepted because I don't think people are as bothered. But what I mean by that is they're not as bothered about gay men and gay women.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a whole LGBTQ plus, but they're not bothered about the gay and the lesbian. I think that they can kind of deal with that because they've had decades to
Yeah.
kind of deal with it.
So there's almost been this acceptance of gay and lesbian people,
Yeah.
and almost, I suppose, in some respects, that acceptance is probably heightened because we've now got all these different kind of variations of who people love, what people love, you know. And maybe that's now gone to this extreme where actually that's quite normal. That's kind of like, well, that's quite normal. We can deal with that. But there's this now whole kind of pansexual, you know, various different kinds of sexualities that are now coming along. Maybe that's now become the extreme of what perhaps gay was back in the 90s. I mean, I've seen it. I think I'd say there's still challenges of homosexuality in certain industries, sport being one of them. I don't think there's a Premier League footballer that's come out yet and has said they're gay. So there still seems to be a stigma there. There still seems to be a fear there. Whether that's because it's deemed as a masculine sport, I don't know. Maybe it's the fan base. Maybe there's that abuse element that would be there, perhaps in the stands. There's definitely a lot of football players that are gay. I think we both know that.
Yeah.
But they haven't come out yet. As you said, the singers have come out, the actors have come out, the sports people haven't yet. So there is still that barrier, isn't there?
Yeah.
In a certain demographic that isn't accepting it. And I wonder whether that will change or why that is.
Mm. I think it will change. I can't see it happening anytime soon. I think that, you know, football is one of the oldest sports that you know that we can think of, and it's such a passionate sport.
Mm.
And I think that's where kind of the issue comes into it, is how passionate the fans are about football. That, you know, I'm not a football fan, but I do support a team. And I'm not going to say it because it will probably go down like a lead balloon. But I happen to know that there's a football team in the Premier League whose fan base is so passionate and so predominantly loud throughout the match. And I will say it's Leeds,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Leeds fan base are the loudest and most passionate supporters,
yeah.
and you hear them absolutely rinse the other team and the other
Mm.
players for whatever reason. And you know, you multiply that then by the 40 plus other teams in the Premiership, for example, and it's going to be terrifying for anybody. Week
Yeah.
in, week out, twice a week, you're playing a game, and
Mm.
you're getting absolutely rinsed. Of course, you'd rather keep your private life private.
Yeah.
And I think that it does come down to, you can't, when we have racism in football, you can't manage it fully. You can't blanket manage racism in football. And I know they're trying and they're making
Mm.
steps towards it, but it still happens and it still exists. And for some people, that is, you know, absolutely awful and horrendous for them, and it sticks with them forever. So, you know, you put that onto a gay man as well, who the spotlight is now shone on him because he would be the only gay man in professional football.
Mm.
It's a huge responsibility, and some people just don't want that
Yeah.
responsibility, and that's absolutely fine. So I think we've got a way to go yet, when it comes to the male dominated sports, such as football.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think in some respects as well. You look at the Black Lives Matter; they're kneeling before matches. They're actually getting stick now for doing that. So I kind of feel like if you do or you don't, you're going to get grief. And football, you know, I go, as you know, most weeks, and the chants that come out of the crowd are really personal, and they are quite cutting. And
Yeah.
you get comments about players' wives. You get, so I think there is that element that I think, until there is that complete acceptance, the fear of doing it is too much. Here's a question for you, and it kind of brings us on to the next topic around kind of the perception of the LGBT community. I'm somebody that looks at the LGBT community. I look at gays, transgender, and I kind of look at it and I think, my personal view, and you can shoot me down here, I feel like they need to stop making a fuss about it. Now, what I mean by that, let me tell you what I mean. So I look at people, and typically it's transgender, and maybe that's because it's a relatively new thing. But I see transgender rights, and I see people, screaming for transgender rights, and they're really making a point of this. Because I'm so accepting of it all, I kind of feel like you're almost creating a problem by raising a problem, if that makes sense. I kind of feel like if you didn't create a problem, if you didn't raise a problem, would there be a problem? And maybe that's my view. I don't know. And I see it sometimes when I look at people's LinkedIn profiles, for example, and they have pronouns. And I kind of look at that and I think, I don't care. And maybe this is just me then. I don't care if you're a them or a they or a she or an it or I don't care. But I kind of feel like by you raising that problem, you're almost creating a problem. Because someone's going to go, oh, okay, there are them, there are they. Where actually it doesn't matter, and it shouldn't matter. Certainly in industry and business, it shouldn't matter. You can be known as whoever you want to be. You can be who you are. But I'm very accepting of that, and maybe that's just my view, and maybe that isn't the majority's view. I don't know. Where do you? And you could be shooting yourself in the foot here by the community backlash. But I just feel sometimes by creating a problem, you're almost creating a problem that wasn't necessarily there.
Yeah. First of all, I don't think you are creating a problem. I think the problem is discrimination,
Yeah.
and that is there, regardless of what we see or what we don't see.
Yeah.
We know it's there. So that's the problem. People wanting to be known by their correct pronouns isn't a problem, in the same way that I would expect somebody to pronounce my name correctly. If my name was Ashley, which it is, if it was Ashley,
It was.
my name was Ashley, and somebody was pronouncing it incorrectly,
Yeah.
I would correct them, and it wouldn't be seen as a problem.
Yeah.
And I also think with pronouns, when you identify as whatever you want to or choose to or allow yourself to identify as, and somebody looks at you and thinks he's male, so he must be a he.
Yeah.
And you identify as they, because there are times when you feel more masculine than you do feminine, and there's times when you feel more feminine than you do masculine. So the gender fluidity is there. I think it's just about saying what you think that you see is not necessarily always correct, and it's not creating a problem by just politely saying to somebody, here are my pronouns, they're they, they're them, he, him, she, shit, hers. I think that you're not creating a problem there. You politely just educate somebody very quickly, and you're already kind of just stopping that problem. And I think by putting your pronouns in places such as LinkedIn, on your email signature, all of those stuff, it actually avoids that conversation, because you're already.
Yeah, I think it does. I suppose, like I say, I'm very accepting of every single kind of whoever you want to be, and maybe from my point of view, I'm kind of like, well, why making a fuss about something that isn't an issue? But maybe there is an issue.
Yeah, I think the fuss comes from the other person. We're not making we are not making a fuss because we identify as he and him. So we're not making a fuss because people automatically know that. But the other people then are going, well, it's they, it's him, it's them. What is it? What is it? And I don't want to. I think people are more worried about offending somebody, so they're scared to say the thing. If it's already there in front of you for you to acknowledge and know, you will never be able to offend somebody in that way.
Yeah, no, very true. I suppose from a hiring perspective, what I see sometimes, and we talk about discrimination, we talk about unconscious bias or even conscious bias. Sometimes when people see that, they see that pronoun, they straight away think, oh God, this person's going to be hard work. And I see it.
Why do you think they're going to be hard work?
I think, well, not me, but I think the perception is when they see that is it becomes, because they've got that strong opinion of what they should be known as, you kind of straight away look at that. And I've seen hiring managers look at it and they've said to me, is that going to be a problem? Is that going to be an HR issue? Do you think there's going to be one of those challenges there? And I kind of go, well, look, you know, for me, I don't have an issue with this, but I think that perception from and typically it's from straight people. I think the perception from straight people is still there, that it's that pro-gay and pro-rights, and it's people kind of making a stand. And sometimes that can be daunting when you're hiring people, because you don't want to open a can of worms. You don't want to get yourself into a situation where, you know, you could have somebody that is potentially causing a problem. It's a bit like when you know, I've hired women sometimes, and
just sometimes, not all the time.
I try not to.
You can't. Yeah.
But I've hired women, and what I was going to say was sometimes there's a reason they've left their previous company, for example, and the reason they've left their previous company might be that they felt intimidated by a male colleague, or they felt there was some kind of a sexual kind of situation that made them feel uncomfortable. Straight away in my mind, I go, okay, I've got to be careful here, because I'm a very male-dominated industry. Are we going to run into that same problem? And I think that's what I talk about when I see the pronouns. Sometimes people think, are we going to run into a problem by having somebody that's so pronouns and those kind of acknowledgements?
Yeah, I think just to go back on that, when you mentioned about, for example, a female who has left a business because she's felt intimidated, she's felt threatened, she's felt uncomfortable by a male. Once again, that wasn't her that was the problem. It was the person. And I feel that hitting the nail on the head, too many people are going, she must be the problem because she's left because she was intimidated. No. The problem was the person that made them feel intimidated and made them feel that. So what can I do in my company to make sure that nobody, whether you hire this person or not, that nobody already in my company feels that way ever and leaves because of that? And I think it's always an education piece. And I think it's so easy to blame the person that's left because they were harassed, they were abused, and for all of these reasons, whether it's gender, sexuality, whatever it is. But once again, you highlight so much that, oh God, is this going to be a problem for me? And so yeah, it's not that person that's the problem. I think that it's a great
I mean, look, and I suppose the challenge on that is that sometimes they are the problem, because then it's a bit like the race card, isn't it? It's very easy to use that as a discriminatory tool if you're not getting your own way, or if you're not going down a route you want to go down. It's very easy to go, oh, it's because I'm black. It's very easy to go, oh, it's because I'm gay. Oh, it's very easy to go because I'm a woman. And I think that sometimes that is used. And I think that equally doesn't help the whole equality situation, because people are using that as a tool to get what they want.
Absolutely. It's just as easy to say, oh, it's because I'm a straight white man.
Yeah.
It's just as easy now to say that, oh, they're not going to pick me because of the Equality Act. Now I'm a straight white man, so I'm not going to get the job. It's just
which is happening. As I mentioned to you off camera. It's happening now. Straight white men are coming out going, we are now the most discriminated demographic, which is bonkers. It's completely bonkers. But that's now how they're feeling.
Yeah, and everybody is entitled to feel that way, because the fact of the matter is they probably are feeling that way. And people aren't just playing it as a card. People probably are feeling that way. And it's just as important to take those feelings into account as it would be for a gay black man or a gay Asian woman. It would be just as important to take those feelings into account. And that is exactly what inclusivity and equality is. It's not, okay, let's build up the minority of Afro-American people.
Sounds good.
I'm Afro-Latino, so
it must be Afro-Canadians,
yeah. But let's build up that community whilst we're knocking the supremacy of the white man down. That doesn't work, and it will never work, because what you're going to do then is you're going to end up with the white man down here and, for example, black man up here. And it's just a switch. It's just a shift, and it's not going to work until they're both here. Then there's continuous work to be done on both sides. And I think, as you say, it's very easy to play any card. Whether that's your race, whether that's your sexuality, whether it's a disability, whatever that may be, it's very easy to play that card.
Sorry, go on.
So I think that when you put yourself in that position, you've just got to take yourself away from that unconscious bias and say, okay, what is the issue here? Is the issue that you're not being treated fairly, or is the issue that you want to be treated better than
Yeah.
somebody else?
And I think to be honest, I think it's those it's the people that are using those inequalities to their advantage that are harming the demographics and harming the chances of a complete equality. Because I think by raising those problems unnecessarily, and lots of problems are genuine and lots of problems, we know it happens, but there are some that happen unnecessarily. They are the ones that I think fuel the fire to cause the less equality, which we're all kind of striving for. Touching on a point you just made, then your background, your heritage, you are a gay man. You've also got kind of a multicultural background. Um, how has that been for you in your 35 years, I think?
34, but thank you.
34. Yeah, 34. Not there yet. How has that been for you then? So you've kind of got the challenge of different aspects, haven't you? The challenge of different discriminations. How has that been for you growing up, but also into early adulthood?
Yeah, I think when I think about that, I think the odds are already stacked against me. I think,
I know, yeah. Yeah.
it's crazy to think not only am I a gay man, I'm Afro-Latino, my mum's from Cuba, my dad's from Barbados. So I have all of these different ethnicities, these different all these things, I guess. Growing up, we grew up in as you're very much aware of my background, we grew up in a
Yeah.
county estate in Wolverhampton, a very working class area.
Yeah.
Race wasn't ever an issue growing up, because it was such I guess, a mixed environment
Mm.
anyway. And we never saw race as an issue.
Yeah.
Take the race side of it, and then you add the gay side of it. The gay was more of an issue for me growing up than the race. And
Mm.
I think because I was such an effeminate young boy, who my friends were all female. I listened to Steps and S Club 7 and all of these
I'm not going
great
to judge. I'm not going to judge.
bands, these great amazing bands. Growing up and listening to those, I
Yeah.
think it was very obvious. But at the same time, I think that the battle was with myself of
Mm.
trying to be like, okay, I'm really, really effeminate, and I'm really camp. So let me just push it even further and be even camper and be even more effeminate, because I think that I was the funny kid, i.e., what I was talking about was the gays had to be funny, and everyone would say that they're really funny, and so I
Yeah.
had to be that, and I think growing up, I pushed myself so far to that stereotype that I'd lost who I was anyway.
Yeah.
And it took me a very long time to find out who I actually was. I knew I was a gay man. I'd always been gay, and I've always, always, always known that I was gay.
Yeah.
So that was never an issue, but it was finding where my tribe was and fitting in with my tribe, because I would be with all the girls, which was great, but then there was this part of me that wanted to hang out with the guys and and just be a little bit more kind of
Mm.
involved in that, because I think I was doing myself more harm by just having female friends,
Yeah.
because it wasn't me, and it wasn't what I wanted. Many years later, when I stepped into adulthood and I joined the army, that's when I kind of was around more men and more males, and I had that opportunity to be a little bit more of myself.
And that's we've spoken about it before, and that's a strange career move for a gay man,
Yeah.
and it's not something you would typically see. And it kind of brings me on to a point I was going to make, which is the acceptance of gay men in particular in masculine capacities. So if I think about some of the leading actors right now, and we look at the action heroes, do you think there would be an acceptance of, for example, if The Rock came out and said, "I'm gay," would he still get the parts that he gets? Would he still have the following that he gets? Imagine a Sylvester Stallone, coming out with his next Rambo film or Rocky, and actually he says, "Yeah, I'm a gay guy." Is there still that barrier? That those kind of masculine heroes can't be gay men?
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves The Rock. Anyways, The Rock could do anything and we'd love him.
I wouldn't care. I
He
do
comes
whatever.
out okay, we don't care, we love him. But I think we are accepting. Look at Tom Cruise, everyone accepts him. And I think that that's just an assumption. I probably shouldn't say that.
I was going to say, do you know something I don't know?
But no, I think that there is room for them, and I think that until you can't even blame the actors at this point. You can't say, "Oh, he's Sylvester
No.
Stallone a Rocky or Rambo film and come out as gay." It's not down to him; it's down to the producers. And I
Mm.
think once we get to that part, then we can start casting, the gay lead roles, and not just as the gay best friend, not just as the comic relief. That
Yeah.
still sometimes happens.
Yeah.
And I think that, once we get the production side of it sorted, the behind the scenes, that's when, we can step into that light and be open again, do these open films. But it's work behind the scenes. And I think that's the frustrating part when I hear people say, oh, there's no gay actors doing gay films in lead roles. It's because they're not given that. They're not given that. They can't just make their own film. Well, they can, but they can't
Yeah.
just suddenly, make their own film just to have them as a gay lead role.
But
Um,
I
so
think, I think someone that I look at who is almost there. I think is it Luke Evans?
yeah,
Welsh actor.
yeah.
Now I love him. I think he's brilliant. I think he's manly. I think he's masculine. Some of the films that he's been in. He's done the Hobbs and Shaw. I think he was in that, or one of the Fast and Furious films. He was in that. He's done one of the kind of the myths and legends films where he was a Greek god. He's done the Dracula where he was this warrior Dracula. He's quite a manly man, and he's a good looking guy. He's someone that I would look at and go, he's pretty cool. So he's probably the closest person I can think of that's kind of bridging that gap into that kind of lead actor role, who's kind of accepted still. And it's funny, I didn't know he was gay to start with, but then I found out he was gay, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this is a really masculine, person that people look up to. My perception didn't change. I actually thought, well, that's pretty cool. And he's even been earmarked, I think, recently or in the past for James Bond, for some of those typical masculine roles. And I think that's a good thing there, that someone like that is getting that kind of opportunity. But he's the only one I can think of. I can't think of any others that are getting that kind of position.
Yeah, and I think listening to what you've just said, it really demonstrates, unfortunately, where we are still and how far we've got to go. Because all you mentioned was how masculine he was, how
But that's a
great
good
and
thing.
he was. It's a great thing, but we also have fantastic role models who are effeminate. We also have fantastic role models that
No, but
aren't.
I'm talking about the masculine kind of hero roles, and I think
But then you can have a very feminine or a feminine hero as well. We can
you
still.
could, but I think in what I'm talking about is where you're fighting the Rock in Fast and Furious, where you're
I
fighting.
know loads of hard gay men who could beat up the Rock. Not off the top of my head.
Right, yeah, I was going to say I can't see Julian Clary doing it, but but I think it's a good thing. I think that we need to have that acceptance for those people. It goes back to the football thing. David Beckham, very effeminate person. Arguably you could say there's some homosexual traits there, some tendencies, and he's a massive idol. A massive idol. And you'd never say David Beckham was manly. You'd never say he was masculine. But he's a huge idol. And I think the acceptance of those things is where we need to get to across all of these different demographics. You touched on it with you then. So the early years in Wolverhampton, was that a challenge? Was that hard for you? Not just in I suppose finding your place and your identity, but the general acceptance around you. Did you experience bullying? Did you experience any discrimination, direct, indirect?
I didn't experience bullying or discrimination from any other kid. And people always say that kids are evil or kids are the worst and school's the worst. I didn't. I was so fortunate. And I know kids do. And again, I'm not dismissing that in any other. I am going to be honest and say that I didn't, as a child from other children. I didn't experience that. Maybe I just happened to have two. I had two older brothers who were fantastically kind of tough and
Yeah.
popular, play football, so I was their little brother. I had a great group of friends who, you know, we kind of were quite popular as well. So there was never that kind of need to. I think if we would have been bullied, it would have just it wouldn't have been a thing. It wouldn't have been a huge thing. It would have just been a kid thing. My discrimination came from adults.
Right.
We've touched on this previously, where adult parents at school gates waiting to pick up their kids, and I would walk past them and I'd hear them say, "He's that gay boy. He's definitely gay."
Mhm.
And laugh and snicker and do all of these things where, you know, 6 or 7 years old is awful. It's an awful experience because you hear that and you think at 6 or 7, what have I done wrong and what am I doing wrong? And
Yeah.
you know, that was where the bullying, and I wouldn't say bullying, but that was where the discrimination came from adults who, you know, you're supposed to think that, and females as well, mothers, as a kid, if you're ever in a situation where you are lost or whether you are scared or terrified and you can't find your parents, they always tell you to go to a mother, and because that's their nurturing nature.
Mm.
Never felt that. I always felt scared of mothers. I always felt terrified of them. I didn't want to go to friends' houses because of their parents and like their moms, and I always felt that a sense of real anxiety, even as a 6 or 7 year old, based on what I'd hear and based on what, you know, I would be. And it wasn't that they were saying it quietly; they were saying it so that I could hear, and they would laugh about it and they would joke about it, and so that's where the discrimination
Mm.
came in for me as a kid.
Yeah, and that's heartbreaking to hear because I know as a kid, I was a hugely anxious, scared kid about anything. And I'm a straight guy, so I think to have that kind of direct or indirect kind of abuse for a small child is horrendous, isn't it? And you're probably in a world, and I look at kids now where it is more accepted, but you're in a confused mindset anyway. So to have that confused mindset heightened by people going, "This is wrong," this is strange. It's a horrible place for children to be in. Do you remember being at school? How many openly gay or lesbian people were there?
Just me.
Mm. Yeah,
Just me. I took the spotlight from everyone. If there was
yeah.
nobody knew.
You pushed them all away.
There
You
wasn't
won't,
room
you
for any
won't, you
more.
won't compete.
There wasn't room for any more. There was just me. And no, and it was. I can't remember any other kind of
Yeah,
effeminate or camp or kind of that got to the, I guess, the extent that I got to anyway. And when I was at school, I remember speaking about like the discrimination and the bullying, and I had this teacher. She was a music teacher, and I was in primary school, and I was 6, 7 years old. And I remember her taking me down to the head teacher's office for some bizarre reason. I can't remember what it was. Maybe I mouthed off. But taking me
I
down
believe
to
that.
I know, it's tough. And I remember as we were walking down the corridor, and it sticks with me, and it will always stick with me because I loved this teacher, and it hit me really hard. She said to me, she stopped me in the corridor, and she said, "Ashley, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yep." And she goes, "Do you ever want to be a girl?" And I said, No." And she went, "Are you sure that you don't want to be a girl?" And I was like, "Well, I'm sure, no." And she went, "Okay." And then took me to the head teacher's office, and I sat outside the staff room. And I remember hearing the door was slightly open, and I remember hearing this group of teachers talking about me, saying, "Oh, what's the matter with him now? He's ever so odd. He's such an odd kid." And they were like mocking me because I was so effeminate. And then I remember just thinking, "Oh, this is horrible." I thought I'd do everything right at school. I'm quite a good kid in primary school. I'm quite a good kid. And then when I walked back up to the classroom, the same teacher, the same music teacher, I think she kind of thought, "Oh my goodness, what if he says something to his mom or something?" So
Right.
she asked the entire class. She's like, "Just a question, class. Does anyone feel that they want to be a boy or want to be a girl? You know, not already a boy or a girl?" And I remember thinking, this is so horrible. This is
Yeah.
so horrible, horrible, because, I'd been taken out, asked that question and brought back and then asked everybody. And it was, it's embarrassing, it's humiliating. And I
Mm.
remember that always sticks with me. And I think, once again, you're supposed to feel safe in the presence of these teachers, especially females. And it was never the case. at all with that, with certain female teachers.
And that that's interesting, because um, there's a lot of talk in the media, certainly now, about the education of homosexuality, gender, different sexualities. There's a lot of talk at the minute around educating children at a young age on that. And that causes a lot of debate, doesn't it? That causes a lot of debate in terms of, should young children have that information at such a young age? And I look at it, I think there's maybe a pros and a cons of that. I think absolutely we have to start to implement this knowledge at grassroots at a young age. But equally, what you don't want to do is, and this isn't just when it comes to gender and sexuality, I look at this with young children from different, you want to maintain their innocence a little bit. I kind of feel that the world is nasty enough, when you get older. You kind of want to leave children alone for a bit, just to have the magic of being a child. So I kind of a little bit torn. I think, do we need to push that on them at a young age? But then the other part of me is, well, if we don't, how do we start to educate, and when do we start to educate? What do you think on that, in terms of your own personal experience and what's kind of happening now?
I am torn also. I'm a little bit old school in the way that I'm like, don't teach kids about sex because they're going to go out and have sex. That's what my old school mind thinks. We growing up never spoke about sex in our household. It wasn't that it was taboo. We just never spoke about it.
Yeah.
It was never something that was kind of an issue ever. And then I think as we get older, none of us, I'd like to think that none of us were going out and having sex because we it's not because we didn't know about it. We knew what sex was almost. But we kind of weren't going out there and experimenting because it just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a big issue and it wasn't a big deal. And I think there's a responsibility that falls on parents. I wouldn't want somebody educating my child on something that I would rather them learn from me, because I would rather be able to answer their questions correctly and honestly, and not in a broad spectrum that is, on the frame of education where they're supposed to answer it correctly in this way. I would rather be able to answer their questions honestly and openly, so that should that ever arise, and I'm talking about everything now as a whole, sexuality, gender, should anything like that ever arise, they feel comfortable and safe enough to come to me and speak to me about that. Then on the flip side, don't come and ask me about Pythagoras' theories, because I don't know. Leave that to So once again, so that's kind of where I stand on it. And I think that don't shy away from it, and don't, pretend it doesn't exist, because I think that's just as harmful. But also you've got to be willing to answer the difficult questions in an honest and open way. And I don't think that schools are allowed to do that, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We've experienced it firsthand. So my youngest is 7. There's a child in his class who was born a boy, but has transitioned, hasn't had surgery, etc., but is now functioning as a girl. And it was interesting to see the children's reaction to that, and it was interesting to see how the school dealt with that. And what was interesting was the children didn't care. There was no big announcement. There was no fanfare. There was no sit down and it just kind of happened. And I talked to my son about it. And what was interesting in my son was this boy was one of his best friends, and they were playing football and they were in the field wrestling, and he'd lost his friend because his friend was now with the girls. And that was the bit he couldn't quite get his head around. He was like, well, why can't I play football with, and the child's name has changed now. And so, but he couldn't understand that. And he was like, but he never once said to me, why is he now coming to school in a dress? It wasn't even a problem. And that was what was funny. It was this acceptance of these young children. And maybe that's their innocence. Maybe that's their not knowing, but they were so just like, yeah, okay. but he was more concerned about, well, why can't I wrestle with my friend anymore on the field? And why can't I play, and that was interesting to see, because like I say, there wasn't a big fanfare at school. There wasn't a big announcement. And some of the parents wanted that. They wanted, you need to sit down and talk to these children and explain it. We were very much of the view of, well, if they're not raising a problem, if they're not raising an issue, don't worry about it. So it was interesting to see how that played out. And as I say, the children, for me, dealt with it brilliantly. There's been no bullying, there's been no teasing, there's been no mocking. It's just kind of gone, okay. And that's interesting. And I know from being at school around the same time as you, maybe a few years before you, but yeah. I remember yeah, definitely. I remember, but there was no gay people, there was no transgender, there was no lesbians. We all used to kind of go, he's definitely gay. You could tell, but no one ever came out and said I'm gay. My older children now, I would honestly say that 50% of their school in their year, there is a different kind of sexuality preference or sexual preference. It's become so common. It's become so talked about. It's become, and I suppose what's interesting with that, and it leads me on to one of the other points I wanted to ask you is, do you think people are doing that because it's fashionable? Because it's become a trend? Do you think people are now using it as I want to be different. I want to be seen as a little bit unique. And I'm not talking about everybody, because you've got genuine people that are genuine in their feelings and who they are. But I also feel there's lots of people now that are jumping onto that bandwagon, and they're flip-flopping, aren't they? They're changing from one to the other because it's become kind of this cool thing to do.
Yeah. Let's just make sure that we're aware this isn't like a fashion trend. So it's not like pedal pushers and it's just going to go out of fashion at some point.
But I think some people see it as that, and I think that's the problem.
I completely understand where your perception is on that, but what I think, in my opinion, is because it's now more accepted, people are allowed to experiment with that feeling that they would have suppressed many years ago. So when we talk about people flip-flopping, so to speak, they are experimenting with something that 15, 20 years ago would have been so unheard of that they would have had to suppress it. So they go through their entire life not knowing if that was actually my true identity.
Yeah.
And now that they are in a position where it's accepted, they're in a position where they can try these things and say, it's for me, but it's not for me. But they'll never, that suppressed emotion and that suppressed feeling, which can absolutely eat you up inside, to say, I wish I'd have tried that, but I would never know.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a big factor of it. I'd like to think it's a big factor of it. I think I'm just very forgiving in the way that I'm like, I hope it's not just a trend, because it is very harmful.
I think, look, and I ask these things because they are, some of the questions I'm asking you, they are difficult questions, because I think you have different perceptions of these things. And, I think it's very easy to have the kind of the rose-petaled view of everything, the rose-petal glasses on, and kind of assume that everyone is genuine and everybody is doing things with a sincere mentality. But equally, I think they're not. And I think, my kids, as I say, they talk about children that are changing sexuality and sexual preferences on a daily basis. And I think that's what, and their perception is, well, they're doing it for attention, and there is that element, and it is difficult. And again, I think that's not helping the cause. That's not helping the equality cause. But it is a difficult topic, because how do we know? Yeah. How do we know? And you could have very confused children out there, very mixed up children. And yeah, they might be experimenting, and they might be changing, and they might be, so we can't judge. But I do feel that there is some of that, and especially with social media now, and I think, unfortunately, TikTok and some of those things that are out there and accessible. My children, they change their interests and their hobbies on a daily basis because they've seen something on TikTok. I'm not saying they suddenly change their sexuality, but it does happen. And I think, unfortunately, it's kind of the world that we've found ourselves in. moving on then to the work environment and professional capacity, you're in again what is seen as a relatively masculine industry. How do you feel? And let's not just focus too much on you know gay and lesbian and transgender, but general equality. How do you feel in that kind of an industry? Equality has changed, or hasn't it changed?
I think there's a long way to go. I always say this with everything, don't I? I think there's a long way to go. I think the company that I work for was so fortunate, and I mean this sincerely. We're so fortunate to have executive people there who are so wanting to make a change. And these are people who are in a position where they can make a change and they can to make a change. I think of my director of construction industries for the company that I work for. He is a straight white male.
Yep.
He's so passionate about making LGBT plus prominent within this company in any way that he can help. He's the exec sponsor of an employee resource group, which is for the LGBT plus community. And he's wanted to get it off the ground for so long that I could see his frustration with it. I could see his frustration that, this isn't a tick box exercise. He sees this company, he's been with the company for such a long time, and he sees that there is a change needed. But he's also very much aware that as a straight man, there is only so much that he can do without saying it is a tick box exercise, because I'm not a part of this community. I'm an ally and I have, a vested interest in it. But there's only so much that I can do without it looking very, very, box ticking. So the change there is coming. I co-chair the equality, the LGBT ERG. There's a lot of letters there, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
But I co-chair that one.
You know what? There's some more that I've seen recently. So it's LGBT. Is it QI plus?
QI two F.
Is there a plus in there? Or I saw it the other day, and I actually had to ask a waitress because I was discussing it with my children, and we were kind of debating it. And the waitress went, "Oh, I know what that is."
Yeah, there's a lot. But I think if we step away from the letters and the anagrams, I think as a whole, I think it's so important, especially in the industry that I'm in. It's so important that we have a fantastic backing and a sponsor that is to do that, in the same way that they have a fantastic exec sponsor for the women of the company.
Do you think as exec sponsors, do you think they get demonized a bit? So what I've seen, and I'm very pro equality and I'm very pro inclusion, I sometimes get shot down from the LGBT community going, what do you know? You're a white straight male, and I'm kind of going, I'm trying to help, do you think that happens?
Yeah, I think if I look at our sponsor, he's fantastically from Wolverhampton as well. So he's made of good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Tough as nails.
Yeah. But he's aware of that. He acknowledges that and he owns that, but that doesn't stop him. And I think that's where it comes in. And I think that's the difference is he will say, okay, they're just saying, what do you know? I don't know everything. And there's a lot more that I don't know than I do know. But this is why I want this, in order to learn, in order to be educated, so that when it comes to a point where people are asking me, I'm aware and I'm able to help and I'm able to do something. So yeah, they can get shot down. And I think he's tough. He's tough, believe me. He's a good guy, and I think that he's doing everything right for the right reasons.
It's a difficult one, and I sense it. Even in this conversation with you, I sense it where you're asking a question, you're going down a road, and you kind of feel like I'm going down a bit of a murky road here, and as a white straight male, you kind of think, I don't want to feel like I'm talking about something that I don't have the right to talk about. And I think that's hard because I want to learn. I want to talk about these things, and I will make the wrong judgments. I will make the wrong assumptions, as I probably have in this conversation. You're probably going, Jesus Christ, this guy's got no clue. But it's because I want to learn and I want to understand these things. And I think sometimes by getting shot down, you're not given the opportunity to do that. And like I say, I've had that in various posts and various podcasts I've done and various live conversations where the LGBT community will say to me, you have no right to talk about this. And I'm kind of going, well, I kind of want to get involved in this. And as you say, as an ally and everything else, I feel you have to be given that platform, and you're not going to get it right. And I'm not going to get it right. And I'm going to make wrong judgments and wrong assumptions. And I'm going to, but that's part of the learning, I think, and having conversations with people like you is to give me that different perspective that perhaps I don't have. And I think we have to do that from both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I learn every day. We talk about the anagrams and we talk about the letters, and I will personally say that I don't like the Q in LGBTQ because growing up I hated the word queer.
Yeah.
Saw it as an insult. I saw it as one of the worst things that you can call a gay man. And I know it's a way of owning it, and I know it's a way of us reclaiming that and having it as our own. But I still feel that insult of it.
Yeah.
I still feel that it's almost unnecessary, really, for us to have it and to claim it. But I also wouldn't go, never ever ever use that word and etc. I get it. Some people want that word because they're reclaiming it, and I get it completely. But there are things that I will still have to learn, and I'll still have to learn about language, and it's a learning experience for every single person involved. And I think we will get things wrong, we will mess up, but it's about learning how to not do that.
I think so, and I think we have to accept that we have to learn. I think it's the only way that we, as individuals, I think, will address the general equality. We have to learn, and conversations like this, I think, are brilliant because you've got two people coming from different perspectives, different backgrounds, talking about a topic where we're both striving for the same thing, but we're coming at it from different perspectives. And I've had a very different upbringing to you. Let's say very different. My family are from Newcastle. Goes back to the kind of the mining industry, very similar to Wolverhampton. My great granddad was down the coal mines in Newcastle. So I did come from a very tough Geordie background. So very similar probably to that. But I've always been that kind of white privileged male. We haven't had homosexuality that side of the family. We have on the other side. So it's been an interesting family to grow up in. And for us to get our heads around the new kind of way of life. And I've always been open to that. Is my granddad the same as that? Probably not. Was his dad the same as that? Probably not. So it is interesting to see, the evolution. We're going to go on to a different topic. Well, I say different topic, a similar topic, but slightly more risque. And I know it's one you've been looking forward to me asking. Transgender. So transgender has now become one of the most talked about topics, I think, in media. We've seen the recent situation in Scotland where Nicola Sturgeon basically lost her job because of how she handled the transgender prisoner or the person that was claiming to be transgender being put into a female prison prior to wanting to be known as a woman, as a man. The man raped two women with a penis, but then claimed to be transgender, wanted to go into a female prison. Nicola Sturgeon essentially lost her job because of her handling of that. So my question to you is, where do you stand? And I don't want to put you into a difficult position here, but it's interesting to know your view. Where do you stand on the transgender, male female debate? Do you have a view on that? And you can always say you don't, of course, but do you have a view on what makes you, a male, what makes a female, and where does that line come in?
Much like yourself, as a non-trans person, it's very difficult to to know everything and know what's right and know the feeling side of things. I think I have to take emotion out of it. Um, and trans people, whether it's trans men, trans women, or anything in between, I think have a really, really, really big battle, regardless of how accepting that the community or that the world will be.
Yeah.
Battle comes from their medical side of things, their mental health.
Mm.
Um, it comes from so much more than just whether somebody will say whether it's he, she, or they. Um, and I think that at the moment we recently had the death of that murder, should I say, of the 16-year-old
Mm.
girl, Brianna, who was murdered in a hate crime for being trans, 16
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And to think that there is that much hatred and that much violence from other children, it is terrifying.
Mm.
And when it comes to a trans debate, all we can do is show our support in any way possible. And I'm not going to sit here and have a discussion about whether I think it's right, whether I think it's wrong, whether there's, should they identify as, should they be allowed to be in men or women's prison? Should they be allowed to use the same bathroom as their
Mm.
opposite sex that they display as? That to me is so much more deeper, and it's a political issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I cannot physically address any of that in a way that would be doing people like Brianna justice,
Yeah.
because I don't know enough, and I will continue to learn, and I'll continue to try to learn. But what I will say is that we as a community, and I mean everybody,
Mm.
we need to work damn hard to protect, trans youth.
Yeah.
Um, because if we don't, we will see more and more murders. We'll see more and more hate crimes committed because we're not doing what we can do and supporting the trans community. And that's all I have to say on that one, really, because I don't want to do a disjustice or a
No,
disservice.
no, no. And I think your stance on that is absolutely spot on because, as I sort of say, I don't know enough. I can't pass judgment on what you should and shouldn't do, and it comes down to feelings, emotions. It comes down to the individuals. It's such a difficult topic to for us, who aren't trans, to be able to say what is right and wrong. It's an interesting one at the minute, and I think the debate will rumble on, and the conversations will rumble on. Why do you think there's so much hate towards trans then compared to gay and lesbian? Is it because it's new? Is it because it's the unknown? Is it because it's a little bit different? And maybe it is going back to what you said originally, which is that was the position that gay people found themselves in, in the 80s and 90s. So I've got a cat climbing on my leg.
That's okay.
Do you think that's why? Do you think it's because people are scared almost of this new sexuality?
Yeah, I do. I truly do. I think that go back to the 80s when we had the AIDS pandemic, and everyone wanted to blame the gays.
Yeah.
Everyone was saying, they're not worthy to live. And that's exactly what it was. There's no if, buts, or maybes about it. We had people in power who said that we were not worthy to live because they didn't do anything to help us because we were gay and we brought it on ourselves. As time goes by, we are fighting back and we are proving that we are just as worthy, if not more worthy, than some people in power.
Of course.
And we're fighting back. You now have trans people, and this isn't a new thing. This trans people isn't new.
No.
It goes back centuries, and many people aren't aware. And this is something that I love and something that I would always tell people, that when we go back to Stonewall and we go back to the very first Gay Pride March, the very first person to fight back against the police was a Black trans woman, Marsha P. Johnson. She was the first person to throw a brick through a window and cause a riot, because we do. But he was the very first person. So trans women are so prominent in our lives,
Yeah.
or making change and making movement, that it's almost insulting that we just disregard them and say, crack on and do your, once you get your stuff sorted, then we'll be behind you. We need to be doing it now. We need to be behind them now. And I think it's shocking for anybody who isn't from an LGBT plus community to be like, why is this, why is this man now a woman? Why is this person now not who I thought they were? And
Yeah.
it's a fear of, an absolutely irrational fear of, what do you think that they are going to do now that they couldn't do prior to them transitioning?
And why does it matter?
Exactly. It doesn't. It doesn't. I think it's just an absolutely rational fear, and a very small minority who are so powerful, but a very small minority who are just ridiculous. You know, we listen to idiots all the time, and we're brainwashed into thinking that we should follow their opinion.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more for those people. And that's not me saying people don't vote. And, you know, that's not a political thing. It's about, you can vote for whoever you want to vote for. But remember, your opinion matters more than the opinion of somebody else who's getting paid hundreds of thousands of pounds to tell you what to do and ignore your opinion. So that's just how I feel on that. I do think that they're scared. I think it's an irrational fear. And to be honest, it's only a minority of idiots.
Do you think discrimination generally comes from fear?
Yeah. You know, we're not born to hate anybody. We're not. It's ridiculous. We're taught to hate in the same way that we're taught to love. We're taught what's right, we're taught what's wrong. But when it comes to fear, the only reason you're fearing is because you're unknown. You can't be scared of something that you are fully aware of and fully educated. I say that you're scared of lions. We know what lions.
Yeah.
But
They are scary.
Yeah, they are. But it's a fear of the unknown, and if you're not educated in by the people that matter and by the people that mean something who are going to educate you and love, you'll always be scared. Fear turns into hate. You're going to hate. It's a shame. It's a big shame.
I mean, the thing that I struggle with when it comes to the whole fear element, you know, and that's why people discriminate, is what do they think is going to happen? And you can put that down to hate against black people. You can put that down to hate against women. What are they scared of? And this is I had this conversation with somebody at work the other day. We were talking about the whole kind of trans community and acceptance of trans people. It's like, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to suddenly start hitting on you? Do you think they're going to, you know, it's what do you think is going to happen? And I think that's the bit I struggle with is, why are you scared? But maybe that's because I don't have that mindset.
They're scared that they are allowed to live their authentic life and they can't. They're doing maybe a job that they hate.
Yeah.
They're in a marriage that they are despising of the other person, and they see somebody living their authentic true life, and maybe it stems from jealousy as well, that they can't do that. Not saying that they want to transition, but they can't live their authentic life either. So I do feel that plays a part in it.
Okay, interesting. All right. Genders. So I was told recently there's now 100 genders. Actually, no, I wasn't told. I read it. Apologies. It was a BBC documentary, and it was somebody was talking to children, the topic we just spoke about, and they actually said to the children that there are now 100 recognised genders, or more than 100. Do you believe that?
I don't know. Dude, that's news to me.
Well, I mean, you know, I look at it, and this is my view, and you can educate me here, but I look at it as sexuality is one thing, gender is another. So I look at it as you're born a man or a woman. I don't think there's a different gender. I'm not hermaphrodites. Maybe you could be, you know, but that's how I understand it. That there's two genders. Sexuality, I feel, can be kind of whatever you kind of want that to be. If you want to be sexually attracted to a car, I don't know what that would be called, but you can do that. That's your opinion. But from a gender perspective, my understanding is there's two. But that seems to be being challenged at the minute, and that's where I'm kind of, is that right? Is my view archaic on that, or am I maybe not? Am I missing the point?
Once again, I think it's an education piece. I couldn't tell you if there's 100 genders in a way that I'm not educated enough to even guess on that. You know, I think that if somebody is identifying as male, female, or them, so gender neutral,
Yeah.
um, that's all I know.
So maybe we say there's three. Maybe you've got gender neutral, man or woman, and that would cover most of those.
Yeah, for me, for my understanding, absolutely. It's not to say that other people may identify as a different gender. I would struggle to see what a different gender would be. Well, to hear what a different gender would be, I'd struggle until I'm kind of made aware of it, I guess, and then it would just be a case of me processing it in my head and trying to work out.
I mean, some of the things that were talked about in that documentary were people that were living their lives as aliens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, living their lives as, I can't remember one of the other ones that came up, a unicorn. It was that kind of a conversation. And again, they're teaching children those things. And for me, I'm kind of like, are we now going down a murky route of stuff that generally isn't true? Oh, I'd say isn't true. Hasn't been proven to be true just yet.
Yeah, I think we're going down a route here where it becomes, as you mentioned earlier, so murky that it's almost like, let's hold out for a little bit before we start just saying, I did read something recently where somebody identified as frog, and I can't remember what that stood for.
A frog.
Frog. Frog.
A frog.
Oh, a frog. I mean, I couldn't remember what, I can't remember what it stood for, but then there was so much hate about it, and I was like, it's so difficult because once again, because people don't understand it, people are hating on it. I was very much just like, okay, if that's what you as an individual wants to be, then crack on. I think before we start teaching people and our kids all of this stuff, there's enough to learn at school as it is, right? I'll go back to it, maths. There's loads to learn in maths, right? And you then add 100 genders that you've got to learn. You'll never leave school. You'll never you'll never get out of school. There's too much to learn. So I think that you've just got to, some things you've got to just tread a bit more carefully on and just take it a little bit lighter.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go and Google what is a frog now as well. I might, I might identify as a frog.
Never know.
I need to go check. Okay. Sam Smith.
Oh.
Sam Smith is an amazing singer. Probably one of my favourite singers, artists currently. I think Sam Smith's voice is incredible. You know, I remember listening to him, I think when he did the theme tune for James Bond. Remind me of some of the kind of original James Bond theme songs. You know, incredible voice. He's now
sorry, just a second. They
yeah are now, there's been a transition, let's say, in Sam. From now whether that's a conscious transition or whether that's I don't know, maybe it's maybe he was a suppressed I'm going to struggle with this, aren't I? You're going to keep correcting me.
I will.
Just keep correcting me. They strike me as maybe that previously they were suppressed, or maybe they weren't bold enough to come out as they are now. But they're coming out now, very bold, very big, very beautiful. Lots of you know, this is who I am. Do you think that is the right message right now? Or do you think it's an extreme version of the message?
Okay. Well, you know,
I know.
Yeah, so you know the situation.
I know. And look, this is not to put you. I'm torn on this because I look at some of it, and actually Sam filmed his recent song "Round the Corner from Me" at Ashridge. Honestly, this is a struggle, isn't it? And again, great song, great video, but you can see it's pushing the boundaries. And you can see it's going to raise question. So again, I'm torn in terms of, is that doing the LGBT community favors, or is it causing more problem? And you don't have to say you're definitive. You can give me maybe a more of a roundabout answer to avoid you putting your foot in your mouth.
Okay, so Sam Smith. I think with Sam, I think they are an amazing artist.
Mm.
We take everything else aside, whether they're male, female, non-binary, we take everything aside and say that Sam Smith is an amazing artist of our time, one of the best.
Mm.
I think that there was a suppression there. I think that there was a need to, especially with the age that Sam is, I think that Sam came from a very similar time to us, not
Yeah.
you, so a very similar time to us where they were used as comic relief.
Yeah.
And I think in order for Sam's voice to be recognised for as fantastic as it is, they had to fit into this mold
Yeah.
at that time. Now that they are a global superstar, I think that they are able to really, really come to life in a way that their artistry displays itself. And what I mean by that is, you know, Sam does these out there outfits and out there costumes and out there, and I think as the more recently they are getting more and more kind of dramatic and more and more, you know, in your face. But I think Sam's on a mission to really, really, really push forward this. Gender means nothing. Gender is nothing. You think of people like David Bowie, you think of people like Prince, you think of these people who at the time were pushing these gender stereotypes with the makeup, with the heels, with the hair, and doing this. I think Sam does that as well. But I think that from the beginning of time, Prince and David Bowie were doing that anyway, from the very first.
Elton John.
Elton John, they were doing it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I think people were so used to seeing Sam displaying as a male singer, you know, just dressing, you know, plain. No offense to Sam, but just dressing plain and dressing.
I mean, they typically wore. I got it right then. They typically wore black, from memory. You know, black trousers. You know, very, very plain.
Yeah. And I think now that Sam's at the global superstardom that they're allowed to do these things. They're allowed to push these, but because ultimately they're still winning Grammys, they're still winning Brit Awards, they're still winning Oscars, they're still doing all of these amazing feats for an artist. They're still doing this, but being able to push that gender stereotype even further, fantastic, great, no problem. My issue with Sam Smith is I've watched a number of interviews. I've watched a number of kind of documentaries or, you know, things where Sam has had the ability to educate people and to speak to people and to be very much, here's your platform. We're not going to insult you. You tell us. I think the issue with Sam is that there is no listening and there's no on their behalf.
Right.
There's no listening in a way that I've seen them do interviews and completely and utterly dismiss somebody because they've misnamed them, misgendered them, or whatever. They don't give them a chance to learn and to apologize, and they're so aggressive with that it becomes a little bit like, okay, I'm crying here. This is new to me. You may be pushing this agenda, but this is new to me.
Yeah.
And I'm being shot down and I'm being told I'm wrong and I'm being cancelled by all the Sam Smith fans and I'm doing all of this. And I'm just giving you a platform here to help and to educate what you're doing. I don't think Sam has the ability at the moment to understand that you have an agenda, you have a mission, and you are trying to get people in on it, and that's fantastic. Please allow people to mess up. Please allow people to get it wrong. And when people are getting it right and people are going they and, you know, in that way and they're getting it wrong, I've then seen Sam then try and change a whole new narrative of Manchester City Football Club or Manchester United and change all of this. And I feel to myself, now what you're doing is that the man in Manchester is not a gender. That's not what that is. That's not gender. So for you to try and change it to them, that is actually ridiculous. And that's not a gender. That is actually just you being ridiculous because you don't like the word man. And you're trying to now that people are understanding you, you're trying to now push it and change something else. If you want backlash and if you want to make headlines, if you want to do all that, then crack on. But what you can't do is you can't allow people who mess up to not take accountability and be hard on them and be straight standing on their throat and saying this person should be cancelled because this person. Stop. Because that causes hatred, and that will cause hatred in a way that we as a community have worked too hard for too long to give you that platform that you're stood on now. And I think that Sam, I love Sam, by the way, but I think that there's a lot of learning to do on their behalf. And on Sam's behalf, I think that once they're willing to listen and not just speak, then they will have the platform that they've needed and that we need them to have for a long, long time.
Yeah, and do you know what? I think you've articulated that brilliantly, because I think that's absolutely right. I'm getting it wrong in this conversation, and that's not intentional. That's not for me to demean the gender or the identity. If anything, it's getting used to that new way of talking. It's getting used to that, and you know, in this conversation, I'm learning to adjust how I talk and how I communicate when it comes to somebody that wants to be recognised in that way. So I think you're absolutely right. People need to have that ability to go, oh God, yeah, I'm sorry, and get it right. I agree with you, I think, on that, because I think there's this kind of extreme this extreme kind of agenda now. I mean, the Fisher them comment that I saw on the One Show, it's almost becoming a joke, and that's I think where it's doing more harm, because I've never heard the phrase Fisher them.
I think with that one, just to go on to that one, I kind of, as much as I saw the annoyance of it, I also then had to take a step back and go, oh, hold on, fisherman, that is a gender, because we have fisher women.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, that's a gender. I completely understand it.
Do fisher women identify as fisher women, or do they identify as fishermen?
I don't fish, Tom, so I don't know.
But that's my I think that's my concern, is because I've never heard fisher woman. So I'm kind of, is it not just you're a fisherman?
I mean, I get it if you're you know, if I was female and I was going fishing, and somebody goes, "Oh, you're a fisherwoman," I get it. I guess I get it. It's maybe not just a thing. I guess it's just a thing, once again, that we don't really ever think of in the way that we say postman. We don't really think of postwoman always. I think that we kind of, in our head, we automatically go to the man side of things, so postman, because it's normal to say. So maybe fisherman and fisherwoman are a thing, and in that respect, then okay, fisher them, if that's what you want to refer to, by the way, and if that's how, because if you were to become a fisher person, then I get it. But you can't just take it off completely and just go, it's now fisher them. I think that you just kind of.
I think the Manchester one you mentioned was that it was. I actually thought that was a joke when that first came out, because that was so extreme, and it isn't gender specific. It's a place.
Yeah.
I think that's a good extreme version of that. Okay, so we've covered a lot. I'm learning a lot, which is great. What would you change, or what do you think needs to change to drive equality, and not just, you know, not just in the lesbian, gay, and bisexual and trans communities, but general equality? You know, what do you think? Is it? I mean, you've touched on it, and maybe I'm answering my own question. Is it education?
Yeah. You know, there's education here, but it needs to be from the right people. It can't just be a group of politicians who then say, right, in schools, this is what the teachers have to teach kids, that they haven't gone to university to study. That's really difficult as well. If you're a science teacher who is now teaching about sexuality, and that's, you know, you haven't spent 5 years in university learning about that. You spent 5 years learning about stuff that you do in science.
Yeah.
You know,
we don't know what that is, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it needs to be taught by the correct people.
Yeah.
And I think that the funding that we could put in place to have these in schools, in the same way that I believe that we need to be taught life skills such as mortgage payments, such as those things, I think they're just equally as important in the real world.
One of the big topics, you know, is mental health. mental health is definitely on the increase, or the awareness of mental health is on the increase. So I would argue that schools need to take responsibility to teach children about coping mechanisms, how to deal with stress, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with, ADHD, which is becoming a very prominent, condition at the minute. That seems to be coming up more and more and more. We need to give people the tools to be able to understand these things and cope with these things. You and I know from our years growing up, again, a bit like gay and lesbian and transgender, they weren't spoken about. I'm a massive anxiety sufferer, massive. As a child, it was crippling, but I was just told to get on with it.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of things, forget, my kids are learning about geography at the minute, sedimentary rocks. When are you ever going to use sedimentary rock knowledge, in adult life? I'd much rather they were taught about, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, mental health, anxiety, ADHD, autism. I'd much rather that was given them, and they were given the tools to understand that more so than they are about sedimentary rocks.
Yeah, I agree. And in order to change, I think change needs to start at the very top.
Yeah.
It needs to start at a place where they have the power to change.
Mm.
You are so invested in stopping gay marriage, for example. My best piece of advice, don't marry one.
I know.
Because it's nothing to do with you, and I think we go from so many different angles that we've still got so much to work on. I think that what I would love to see is, I don't want to see gay marriage, I don't want to see straight marriage, I just want to see happy marriage.
Yeah.
I want to see
Right.
just people being able, we all bleed the same, cut us
Yeah.
open, we all bleed red blood, and we're all humans and individuals. You can walk a path of absolute uniqueness. You can walk a path of Sam Smith and, being this artist who is so out there, and it's fantastic, but leave them alone as well. Allow them to walk that path. They're not hurting anybody. They're not harming anybody, in the same way that two gay men who are in love and want to get married legally and recognized, leave them alone. Let them do it. Let them divorce in 3 years' time, like the rest of us. Let them just do all of that and be that. The change that I want to see is no change. I don't want it to be a case of we're getting more rights. I just want us to have equal rights, and I want us to have the same rights. And that's what I would love, but there's so much more work to be done.
I think you're bang on, and I mentioned it earlier on when I talk about the pronoun thing. I'm one of those people that I feel like it just shouldn't even be a thing. I just feel like we should all just be who we are. Everybody is judged equally. Everybody is treated equally. It doesn't have to be a topic of conversation. It doesn't have to be a topic of debate. It doesn't have to make media news what Sam Smith's wearing. It doesn't have to, that's my ideal world. We're not there yet, and I absolutely get that. And I think the way you articulated that around education, knowledge, is the absolute key. I think conversations like this are really helpful because people get an insight into different perspectives, different worlds, different backgrounds. And we've got to keep doing that. We've got to keep educating, learning, talking, understanding, engaging. So it does become equal and it does become normal.
Absolutely. And we can just keep fighting the fight, and we can just keep on keeping on until we get there.
Yeah.
And then carry on.
Well, you're an incredible person to talk to about this stuff because you've got the multicultural background as well as being a gay man, in case nobody knew. But you're an incredible character, and I think people will listen, and I think people will take your views, and you articulate it really well. You've taught me a lot in this conversation, which is great. And I think you are someone that can help to make a difference. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I will let you go. It is Sunday morning. I'm conscious you've got better things to do than talk to me. But it's been a pleasure. I enjoy talking to you all the time. And I hope that people find this valuable, find it interesting. I hope they learn something, as I have. And we can all make the change that we want to make.
Absolutely, agree. Thanks so much, Tom. Really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. My pleasure. Take care.
Yeah.